My first question, and this is for a book about male-female relationships from a male point of view, so current gender issues. And then I'll get the interview transcribed and I'll edit and you'll edit.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Oh, great. Okay. So first question, starting from the beginning, is where and when were you born?
September 4th, 1944,
So,
Santa Monica, California.
so you're a Virgo, and I think of Virgo people as being kind and communicative, sensitive. Does that apply to you at all?
Well, it does. Like a lot of people, I go in cycles. Depends on my mood. It depends on what's happening in the world. I have very little patience for American war making, for example. That's a priority for me. I was in the Army for 13 years, and my family gave its name to Fort Bliss, Texas, which is still, you know, three generations of Blisses. Well, four counting me, but I eventually left the military.
Right. And you ended up in the ministry having a divinity degree. What path led you in that direction?
I hope you don't mind if I cry.
Oh, no. Crying's fine.
So, when I was at the University of Chicago Divinity School, where I got my doctorate, and then I did a postdoc at Harvard. But there was this woman that I was involved with. I was very excited with her, and she invited me to go to out of town together. You know, so I said yes, and I had no idea. Even if she had this in mind, that she might even not have known that he was there. But we went to this conference, and the keynote speaker was Martin Luther King Jr. Soon before he died, before he was assassinated. So that changed my whole life. His beauty, his capacity to speak and to impact on people, because I was still, you know, serving churches then and trying to learn how to do that, and he really helped me a lot. So.
What was there about your growing up years that led you to be so excellent a scholar that you got into Harvard and have a Ph.D.? How was your boyhood leading you in that direction?
Well, I spent a lot of time studying. You know, a lot of people were doing other things, but studying and hanging out with the right people. And I liked studying. You know, I liked books. I mean, I got many of them, and I've had many over many times. I've contributed to 24 books, and I've edited and done a lot of booking in my life, and I still do as much of that as I can, though I'm not as good a writer as I used to be. As you age, things change, your mind changes, your memories change.
What are your siblings? Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I'm the oldest of five. 3 boys and 2 girls.
And did that mean there was a lot of responsibility on your shoulders as the oldest to help out?
Not really, you know. I had a wonderful mother. My father was problematic. You know, he was, a military guy, so he was kind of rough with the boys, not with the girls.
Mm-hmm.
3 boys, but my other brother, one of my other brothers became a Marine, and we're still in good touch. He lives up north of here, and so it's a little bit on about. Oh, and then the big thing was my Uncle Dale and Aunt Elva, because my mother had cancer, and we all got farmed out, and I was 14. I chose my Uncle Dale and Aunt Elva,
Mm-hmm.
who were farmers. And the thing, some of the things I remember is just, being on top of the haystacks and, getting the hay spread around and stacked up and stuff like that. And so that's why I became a farmer, in part because of that. I stepped away from all I kept teaching here and there, but I was no longer doing full-time teaching.
Was Uncle Dale's farm in California?
No, it was in, just lost the name of the state that writes to the right of Omaha. We were in Omaha.
Nebraska?
Yeah, so it's right next to that. It wasn't Nebraska. It was Iowa.
Iowa.
We could say Iowa for sure.
So where did you grow up the 14 years before you were in Iowa?
Well, in the military, you move about every 3 years.
Oh, right.
About every 3 years.
Right. Do you think that your military background is what led you partly to go kind of the other way to peace and being an ordained minister?
Well, it also has to do with the discipline. I appreciated the discipline. The things I appreciate about the military. I believe in the defense of our country, and so I'm not extremist. I think there's a time when you need to defend your loved ones and your values.
Right.
So I became a mixture because the University of Chicago Divinity School, which was the program I was in, taught me a lot about kindness and sort of being caring of people and the people who go to seminary. But I stayed in the military during part of that time because, when you go to seminary, you can get a bypass for a while. So I did that. And I still have some of those things in my guts, things you learn in the military. So I'm not anti-military. It just depends on what the context is, and if it's really a necessary defense, or whether it's just that some people just like it for the wrong reason.
Right. So you served in the military for 13 years in the Army, and you were a minister, a chaplain during that 13 years? Uh-huh.
It was mainly off duty. I wasn't on duty all the time.
It was a reserve?
Yeah, I was in the reserves, yeah.
Were you an undergraduate at University of Chicago?
Yes. No, let me see. No, I started my graduate studies there.
Where were you in undergrad?
University of Kansas. Rock, Chalk, J, Hawk, K, U. It's a good school. It's famous for turning out good people.
That's great.
Threw my dog's bone away, and then she got it again. So I'm going to reach down and I'm going to throw both of her bones over there. Okay, now I'm...
Okay. And then after the military, well, during most of your career, it sounds like you've been a teacher. You taught in psychology in college?
Yeah, I've taught lots of different things. I believe in a variety of things being related.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what did you do your postdoc work at Harvard in?
well, did there was, that's a long time ago, and I wasn't there for a long time. I did host a group. I mean, I was hired. Actually, I was hired through Radcliffe, which is a women's school, but
Right.
it's really a part of
Harvard.
yeah. So,
And so your postdoc work was in psychology?
well, indirectly, yes, but just a variety of stuff. Writing, um, just, you know, there's a lot of flexibility in it.
Mm-hmm. How did you get interested in men's roles and gender roles?
Well, I think it was noticing how my father treated my sisters with a lot of kindness, but the boys, he didn't.
Mm.
You know, he trained us to be warriors.
Mm.
So, and he asked for forgiveness in his later years before he died. I mean, he wrote, I saw it a couple of months ago. I kind of put it in a special family file, and he apologized for his behavior toward me.
Mm.
And once my mother died first, and once she did, I just didn't have much energy to go back to Omaha, Nebraska,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you know, Air Command headquarters are actually very close to Omaha. Omaha is very much a military town, large military town.
Mm. And then how did you get from Chicago to Boston to Harvard to California and your farm in Marin County?
Well, it was just, you know, I had that, how would I describe it? That inclination that you have to do things. And I'm a very public person, but I'm very introverted. And it's a contradiction in terms sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It gets me in trouble. I will leave certain situations. So, yeah.
You were married to a Japanese American woman. What was that relationship like?
Well, it's very interesting that you should ask that because we lived in Berkeley together. And then when we moved, and we ended up spending part of our time here in where I am now. And she came back. I called her about 2 or 3 years ago, just to, you know, just out of friendship, and she didn't respond. And then just a couple of months ago,
Hmm.
she called me.
Hmm.
She's still living in her family home in Katati, where her parents, who were, you know, they were all, she's Japanese Americans. They were all in the concentration camps.
Right.
I don't know why they were there for no reason,
Right.
other than that they were Japanese Americans.
Right.
Japanese American fighters, American fighters, had the best record of any group of people. So it's just, you know, it's one of those things that you get ashamed of. I mean, nothing's perfect, and I don't expect anything to be perfect. So, yeah.
So may I ask why the relationship, the marriage ended?
That's a very interesting question. Because when we got married, we made an agreement not to have children. And then, when she got to a certain age, I mythopoetic contract. She said, I understand where you're coming from, but you're more mature now. And, I wasn't ready to, I wasn't ready to renegotiate the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she was maybe about 40 at that time.
Mm.
And I could even, next time I see her, which I think will be tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, I can ask her, you may want to interview her and get her part of the story, because so much of my story is being militarized, and so much of her story was that way. So, so 2 years after we separated, because I know that urge for a woman in particular to have a child is strong.
Mm-hmm.
But then she decided she only wanted a child with me. So she never had a child. It was my fault in a way. And then, but she's back in my life now.
Mm.
And I'll see her, and I can ask her if she's open to conversing with you if you want to, because she could give you some different aspects of who I am and who I was.
Okay. How did you get involved with the men's movement, with mythopoetic, Robert Bly people?
Well, it was a girlfriend when I was at the University of Chicago who invited me to go out of town to a large gathering of young people, mainly students. And I went, and Martin Luther King was the keynote speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And that just totally changed my life. He just was such a dynamic speaker.
Mm-hmm. And then how did that lead to the men's movement?
Well, that was the part that I really thought I could do a lot of good in, because I had so much military experience,
Mm-hmm.
which back then was pretty much totally male.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad now that there are more women in the military, because they bring a lot. I mean, it was very clear to me and all my 4 brothers and sisters that my mother was the strong one, not my father.
Mm. And so then how did you find your band of men to actually get together and go to the woods and do drumming circles and howl at the moon and that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, we did all of that, of course. And then there was a group when I moved into Harvard. Actually, I was hired at Radcliffe College, which is a part of Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really realize that, but it's the women's part.
Right.
So I worked at Radcliffe College, and one of the things I did was to form a men's group where men could just sit around and do what they need to do, tell stories, and so that was very influential to me.
Was that after you heard Martin Luther King Jr. speak?
Yes.
Uh-huh. So I'm trying to see the connection, because he doesn't really talk about men's roles per se, right?
He doesn't.
So how did you made the bridge? How did that work in your mind, in your
Well,
thinking?
it's just that he was the kind of man that inspired me. You know, and
So you wanted to be a charismatic helper as well.
well, I don't know about the charismatic part. I know this is contradictory, but I'm a pretty extreme introvert. You know, I live alone now. My former wife and I, we still get together and hang out, mainly here. But I spend a lot of time
Well,
certain kinds of ones without any violence.
but you also have a organic boysenberry farm that you farm?
Oh yeah, that's the main thing I do. I've done this for 30 years. I mean, organic boysenberries are barely available anywhere anymore. So I have a niche market. That's what I've been doing the last couple of weeks, is getting the pruning done and so on. It doesn't, they don't harvest until June, July, August, sometimes a little earlier than June.
Mm-hmm.
And my farm, I became a farmer basically.
Like Uncle Dale.
Like Uncle Dale, yeah, and Elva.
Mm-hmm.
She was so strong. Uncle Dale was a very big man. He was huge.
And then how did you find a men's group to work with? I mean, you started the group at Radcliffe, and then and then what brought you to California specifically, and where did you find a men's group in California?
Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I lived in Berkeley.
Well, you taught at UC Berkeley, right?
I didn't really teach at UC Berkeley. I mean, I taught some seminars and all, but I couldn't really say that I taught there.
Okay.
Oh, but there was, now I remember, there was a seminary I taught in, because by that point I had been ordained. Can't remember exactly the name of that seminary now.
Is it Union Theological Seminary?
Yeah, but that wasn't the main one. I mean, I had contact with Union, but there was also one in the San Francisco area. I just can't remember the name.
Okay.
When you get to a certain age, some things disappear totally, other things get mixed up.
So there was a men's group that was already in Berkeley when you moved there?
Yes, there was.
And what kind of men's group? Because there's men's rights, there's feminists, there's masculinists, there's father's rights after divorce. There's many different approaches. What was that group's approach?
Well, none of those things. I mean, the men's groups I was a part of were always pro-feminine. I mean, there was no need. I mean, I think it was that I saw so many people getting in groups that I couldn't be a part of because they were anti-female. I don't think I've ever gone through that. My mother was just such a wonderful woman. And so, yeah, so all the men's, I've been involved with many different kind of men's groups. And conferences, men's conferences, Robert Bly used to do a lot of them. He's a very dynamic speaker. And then there are certain pockets around the country where the men's group is still pretty strong.
Where is that? I'm interested in the current evolution of men's groups.
Well, I haven't kept up with it well. It's just that in certain concentrations of areas, like Southern California, and then up around here, there's always been men's groups. But I'm definitely not into men's rights. I'm not into that extreme. I mean, we just ignored that. We didn't fight with it so much. Have you had a chance to read any of the 24 books I've contributed to? I don't know how available they are anymore.
Not recently, but I have in the past.
Okay.
Because remember, I brought you up to Chico to be in conferences, and you're in a video about men's changing roles that we created from those conferences. So I've been following your work.
Oh yeah, now I remember that. Yeah. Well, if you ever get down here, I have some extra copies of one of the books that I wrote a lot in, and the others you could borrow, but there's one you could have. I mean, though I'm only a part of the book, it's not the whole book.
What would you say the thrust of the themes of your writing have been? That men need to get in touch with their inner masculine deep self?
Yeah, um, and well, includes things not to do, like oppress women or and willingness. And this all got started for me by the woman who took me to hear Martin Luther King and the whole story there. I don't even remember her name. My memory definitely fades.
What it does the need for male bonding in the wilderness, doing ritual poetry, singing, chanting, dancing, does that come from our lack of initiation ceremony for young men, the lack of guidance for young men, as in contrast to traditional societies where young people are reared in age groups with initiation ceremonies and mentors? Is that kind of the purpose of the mythopoetic groups?
Well, it's a big issue for me. Everybody has a different reason for coming to the mythopoetic groups, but for me, it's that male bonding. That I did have that when I was in the military, and then I did have it when I was in seminary. So those, so my military background taught me a lot of good things: discipline, self-protection, and families are very important in the military. Military wives go through an awful lot. My mother did. My mother was the strong one by far.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's often the case. I mean, I think there's a kind of a sexism in the country as a whole. And it's much better than it used to be. I mean, it's much easier now. Not that it's easy, but we are doing some things better. And to me, there was always a relationship between race and gender and other things. It was never limited to just the obvious part of them.
Right. In 1995, you said that your priority was gender reconciliation.
Yes.
And now that it's 2021, how much progress have we made towards gender reconciliation?
Well, I think my observation would be that women have taken the leadership and have raised a lot of legitimate concerns and questions, and we're finally beginning to have women in key places, like as vice presidents and more members of Congress, and so there has been growth, and I'm so glad that my mother was very, very strong. She wasn't dominating at all. My dad was dominating, but I think all four of us, or five counting me, knew that our mom was really the strong one. And I think that's often the case, and it's often been the case. And so I think a lot of male, a lot of the negative male stuff toward women comes from a feeling of inferiority. I mean, I wouldn't reduce it to that. Everybody has a different set of reasons.
You know, there's a neo-Freudian named Karen Horney, Horney, who says she thinks history revolves around womb envy, that early people didn't understand that men played a part in conception of a baby. So it's like women, you know, those Venus figurines, the women were the fertility figures, the giver of life. So she says a lot stems from that womb envy. Do you think that's off the mark, or does it resonate at all?
Well, it doesn't resonate with me, but you know, it might. You know, if I were to think about it, it might be true. So I wouldn't say it wasn't true, but it think the part of the men's movement that I was a part of it was definitely pro-feminist. I mean, I can't tolerate going to meetings, whether it's these, where men are cutting women off and saying nasty things and getting away with it and so on. So I'm still in a men's group, and we're forming another men's group, even though the weather hasn't been too good here for a while, so it's been hard to have our regular meetings in person, which is what I like.
What kind of issues have you seen? How have their themes that men are talking about in the men's group changed over the years, or have they?
Well, one of the big ones is men who have children. I mean, I made a conscious decision not to have children because I just didn't have enough confidence in my skills to be a father. So there are all kinds of different men's groups.
Right. So the men are concerned about being good fathers, or about how to discipline or motivate, or what specifically are they talking about?
Well, a lot of it's talk about family, and also politics and hanging out together outside around a table, and just things that I think men have done historically, but sometimes they've done those things and ended up taking advantage of wives and other people.
So do you think there is more gender reconciliation now?
Yeah, we still need a lot more. I mean, we still have, just 2 women on the,
Supreme Court?
yeah, and very few in the military. But all the studies show that the women who join the military are good military officers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, so I like watching movies where with strong women. I like that.
So I'm trying to understand, what does it do for me as a man if I'm in the woods with other men and we're chanting and howling at the moon? What am I getting out of that?
Well, one of the things is the connection to what men have done for centuries, forever, and just sharing the feelings of being overnight for a weekend with the guys, and having a certain, the men who go, I think are a minority of the number of men in this country, at least. I think there are other countries where the men are much more cooperative, and I have visited some of those countries.
I know that you lived in Chile. Was that a country that you're thinking of where men were more bonded?
Well, one of the places where I wasn't there long. I wish I'd stayed there longer, and that's Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
Bad reputation in this country, but historically, and they're so receptive to Americans. That's the funny thing about it. You're walking down the street, and somebody figures out because of how you're dressed, or because you're in town. It's a pretty small place, the part of Cuba that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just we have these stereotypes, gender stereotypes, nationality stereotypes, political stereotypes. I mean, most countries are full of that too, but I think it's more because we feel entitled. And here, I don't know if this is related to what you're writing about, but it's very clear to me that America is over. There's no way that it can make it through this. That They
Is
were an empire. They were the American Empire.
is
And I
China
never
taking
wanted
over?
to, support the empire part.
Is China the new empire?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I follow. Do you listen to Amy Goodman at all?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I listen to her every morning, and so, of course, she must have a real strong support team because she's at risk every time I hear her speak the truth.
Mm.
So that's what I get a lot of my daily wisdom is just by listening to them. Her speaking, the people she brings on the program.
You also talk about male modes of intimacy. That's not probably face to face like women's, but it's more side by side. Do you observe that still?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There's still, I don't know, some body fear. It's hard, like, when I was active in men's groups before, and I still do, I'm still active, but when I was early active of it, when I lived more in the Bay Area, a lot of the men were very pro-feminine and very active, and some were always gay, so there was that, and there were some that were bisexual. So it's, I'm not sure what to say more about that.
Well, so side by side intimacy means we play basketball or we build a deck together rather than talk about our feelings.
Yes, less talking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the statistics show that women do say a lot more every day than men. And some men are more talky than others, obviously, but
You also write about the male body, and is that about feeling I'm inadequate if I don't have a six-pack abs and I'm 6'3" and big muscles, or what's your thoughts about issues with men and their bodies?
well, I think a lot of men judge other men by their size, and the tall guys and so on. It's actually a little bit healthier to be shorter, as a matter of fact, in terms of longevity.
Mm.
So at least that's what I remember from years ago. But and some men are just not comfortable with strong women. I mean, they need to be. I mean, there's there are many different kinds of men's movements. The ones that I've been involved with are definitely pro female
Uh-huh.
and not don't discriminate against women. I mean, we sit around and tell stories, and there have been, I've tried to do some mixed male and female groups, and they're difficult, they're helpful, but they haven't really worked out well.
What's difficult about them?
Well, what do I have to say? I know this is a stereotype, but I think it's true. If you count up all the words that most women say in a day, and there have been studies on this, and how many words the men say a lot less. They're not as verbal. Many exceptions to that, so that's not a rule. I'm not saying that's always the case.
So
women are starting to do more, to demand. The women's movement is a real blessing to men, and would have been a real blessing to my mother. But she didn't live long enough to see that, to have that happen.
Mm.
But she really nourished all five of us. Military families are often very large.
So the mixed groups that you were involved in didn't work because the men didn't feel free to talk?
Well, I wouldn't say that they didn't work. It's just that um, I haven't found any here. That might have been what I should have said, because in Berkeley, that happened more. And it seemed to be easier to be together. But you're right, what you said about the men going out in the woods, and that really makes a difference. You learn a lot when you do. The context really makes a difference. That's why I live in a very remote part of Sebastopol. You know, it's in the countryside, and it's at a dead end. I'm the second house from the end, and my land goes down to the water. There's a creek down there. So I made decisions that would ensure the value structure that I have. Sometimes I even forget why I'm doing it. It's in my system.
To be a farmer?
Yeah, and to live at this place. I mean, I looked at 100 places when I moved from Berkeley, and I had almost decided. I decided originally that I wanted to live in the countryside, and then after looking at 100 different for sale places, I found a place in Santa Rosa that was on a creek, and I decided that I would move there instead. But then one woman told me she heard there was a piece of land for sale in Sebastopol. So I came here, and the owner who lives right next door happened to be outside, and I asked him, I said, I heard your mother had passed away, and that house will be for sale. And he said, it would. And I bought it on the spot.
Oh, wow.
I just said, I'll pay everything you've asked for. And I have my checkbook here, because, that makes a difference sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't need I mean, I had a helper for a while, but I didn't need that. Then I moved in 10 days later because
Wow.
there were so many things that had to be changed. The place was a mess. But I still live in this, basically, the house that I live in is like about 900 square feet at least, maybe even less. But it's all metal.
Metal?
The siding is metal. But then I built two structures, or I didn't exactly. Well, one of them I built totally. Where I keep all my books and everything. We dragged it here. A Marine buddy of mine many years ago, and then we built it. And that's where I study and keep my computer and everything. Other ones full of my DVDs. I have hundreds of DVDs.
Just to finish with the mythopoetic approach, I think you identify with the archetype of the trickster. Is that the fool?
Not exclusively, right? That's just one of the archetypes.
What are other ones that kind of you identify with?
Well, I think love of the masculine, love of the feminine, love of children, love of parents, love of elders. That's gotten to be very important for me, the elder thing. And as my father got older, he got better. He finally, really apologized to me for the way he treated me. I mean, I have his name, and I was an embarrassment Shepard Bliss III, and he's Walter Shepard Bliss II. So one thing I did was to start using the name Shepard as my real name.
Why were you an embarrassment? Because you were in the military.
Yeah, but I wasn't like he was. I wasn't devoted to it, and I was only there for a short amount of time. I mean, officially for 13 years, and I became a chaplain, and I would go to different military bases and places.
Does that mean that you're a Christian?
Well, that's a good question because I am ordained a Methodist minister, and I did do my studies, but I'm not just a Christian. I mean, especially some Christian principles do discriminate against women. They are biased, so that's why I always get a female dog. This one, right now, she keeps eating something, buying something, and I keep throwing it away so I can follow you, but she keeps coming back. So I'm going to get 2 more. So now I've got 4 of these little kitty dog chews. I don't know if you've seen those.
I'm not sure.
But dogs really like them.
In terms of the men's movement, you said at one point Warren Farrell really was hurt by women, by being in the National Organization of Women. He's been fighting back ever since. He does represent a certain constituency. Could you explain that?
Well, I remember saying something like that, but I can't. I don't think I should comment on it.
What about it seems like the biggest men's organizations currently are things like the Promise Keepers and the Oath Keepers that are very right-wing, I guess you could say. What's that all about?
Well, the men's movement that I was a part of is not very visible anymore. I mean, we still have contingents of it, like, fortunately, 2 men's groups that will begin meeting again, not online, but actually in person.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the rain today, I don't know if it's raining where you're at.
Yeah, it's raining, thank goodness.
Yeah, we need more rain.
Oh yeah, we're in drought.
Yeah, it's could be one of the worst, especially for our area, and I think your area is also really hit hard,
Mm-hmm.
even more than we are here.
So why are more men in those right-wing groups like Oath Keepers and Promise Keepers?
Oh, I think it's fear of feminine strength.
Wow.
In part, I mean, I think, we all had mothers, and we tended to go to them for help and knowledge, and I mean, there's lots of exceptions. I don't want to overdo that, but it's just very clear to me that my Uncle Dale and Aunt Elva, she was so strong. He was too. I mean, he was like, and he was an official. I mean, he was elected official.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of men have fear of women, fear of their power, which is obvious. And fortunately, I think it's becoming more obvious. I mean, I think it's probably the most important thing that can happen to change America is to get rid of. I mean, and that also means letting women be more in the military. I mean, they can get in the military, but they're often mistreated.
Yeah. Well, does that mean that if men were more involved parents, if we allowed them not to work so hard, that some of that fear and resentment of women would be changed?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And we see that happening in the places where the women are entering the workforce um, and finally entering more of the government. And um, so I think at least in this country we're on a roll. And I don't know about other countries. I mean, I think there are obviously countries which, for religious reasons, are even more anti-feminist than elsewhere. And I think I was just lucky that I knew, and all my brothers and sisters knew, that my mother was the strong one and the obedient one. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting to me is that Jesus never made any distinctions based on gender, and he bore witness to women, violated all kinds of Old Testament taboos about touching women. And so if you were really following Jesus, you would be a feminist.
That's a good way to say it. That's a good way to remember it. And I'm going to use that. I hope it's okay if I...
Of course. I say that to kids every Christmas party. Just remember, Jesus was a radical, and he upturned all the old rules for the sake of his principles.
Yeah, it sets the good use of the word radical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the radical, what that word means literally is return to the roots.
Right.
And it's just like, change comes slowly, but there are other countries where there's, the women are more valued.
I'm thinking of Scandinavia, the Nordic countries. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes. Yeah, those are places that, I've been to different women's kind of gatherings when I was in seminary and studying. And that's one thing I took some time off to go. And also to be in a all-male group of monks. Sometimes monks have a very strong feminine presence with them.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, things are getting better. I mean, I had to live through and get a lot of criticism from all sides because of the stands that I took. Some of the men's group were not pro-feminist. I've always been pro-feminist.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that my mother was the strongest one.
Mm-hmm. Were you involved with NOMAS, the National Organization of Men Against Sexism?
Not really. I mean, I think I had connections with them, but it wasn't, there were other groups that I was more...
I think I remember that you were in a pro-feminist, maybe National Organization of Changing Men in Seattle, because I was there and my son was there, and he was young, and men were roughhousing with him, and I think you were one of them. Do you remember being in a conference in Seattle?
Yes, I do. I don't remember any details.
Yeah, I don't expect you to remember us, but that was definitely a pro-feminist conference. Yeah. And it was probably NOCOM.
Yeah.
So if you were going to give a talk to young men, say like a fraternity on campus, what would you want them to think about?
Well, first of all, I would embrace the importance of being circular. So say you have 10 people that you all go around, and I find that helps, and I think there's less competition. I think men aren't really bred to be competitive, but they are encouraged to be that way and to be in charge. but we all, most all of us know that in most families, the women are really in charge. I mean, it depends. Like, it's very clear to me that my mother was stronger than my father.
Mm-hmm.
And my Uncle Dale and Aunt Helva, Uncle Dale was a very strong, big guy, and he was an elected official, and just, I mean, he was partly an image of how to be strong without being abusive.
Right.
About how he treated his wife and how it was very clear how strong she was. There was just no hiding it.
How did that play out in your marriage? And since you were so conscious of female strength and not being the dominant one?
Well, Arlene is very strong, and she was the only woman I married. I had other long-term or short-term relationships, but I think it's different in different countries. I'm not sure which countries are the best. I know which ones are some of the worst.
Well, I always think of Scandinavia as the best. But you lived in Chile for a while?
Actually, I became a citizen of Chile,
Oh.
and that was after getting out of the military. And I joined I got married there to a woman, and then the fascists took over the Americans. They came and they killed everybody, and she was able to get out. And then it was very interesting because she ended up marrying a buddy of mine who was also there as a religious assignment. We were both stationed there. So she married him. And I only found that out because somebody sent me an email many years later and said, is this your former wife? And sure enough it was. And
So you've been married twice?
no, let's see.
If you had the Chilean wife and then you had Arlene, that's two.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the Chilean woman and I got married.
Oh.
I think at that point we knew some of the difficulties, and especially I think she might have insisted on it more than me. But I must admit, at my age, some of the details, it's amazing to me how different it is in the other cultures I've lived in, how they treat the elders. I mean, if your brain begins to fail or diminish, sometimes they want to put you away. A doctor wants to put you away. I've had to fight off a couple of doctors to just stay here in the home that I've lived in formerly with Arlene. And I'm not going to, well, I shouldn't even tell you this part, so I won't, because it might not happen this way. But we're really doing well, and so that's, but I feel so bad because she wanted children and I didn't. And then when she did marry another guy, but then she realized that she didn't want a baby with anybody else.
Wow, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
So what else would you say to this fraternity besides do things in a circle, not with a hierarchy?
Well, I think a very important thing is to welcome men crying. Crying is so natural to just, all the studies about crying
Yeah.
How, if you let enough tears go, then you can get to another place.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Very important, I think. That men cry more. And, sometimes I get embarrassed, though. I've been embarrassed during this conversation because I cry. And I know you're not judging me, but still, it's just like, it's just sometimes feeling there must be something wrong with me, and it's just that I've got a little bit of my mother in me.
Well, you're human.
Yeah, we all do.
I've recently interviewed a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old guy, and they both said around middle school they got pressure to be a man. And that means I think it means don't show your weakness or vulnerability.
Right.
And so that was interesting to me because these guys are young and they still felt that pressure.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you think it's changing in terms of the way we raise boys or not.
Well, I think it's changing, but not enough and not soon enough because, like we have more strong women in the military now.
Mm-hmm.
Women have equal access to the military,
Mm-hmm.
even though some men felt competitive and didn't want that to happen, but it did happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it has in other countries. I mean, women have fought for centuries.
Like in Israel too, especially.
Oh yeah, it's very important. Very strong Israeli women.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. I like that quality in a woman, and I like being confronted and, especially if it's done in a way that it gives me a way of agreeing. But I was an award-winning debate person, and I loved having a woman as a partner. It didn't happen very much a long time ago. I mean, women could debate, but they weren't, they weren't mixed, male and female.
Right. What else would you tell this men's group? Be circular, cry. Anything else you tell the fraternity guys?
Good question. Listen. Don't interrupt. Let's see. What else would I say? It's interesting that you're asking these right now because two of the men's groups I've been in, because of all the pandemic and everything, we haven't been meeting. But we're having our first meeting in about a week or two. I've got it written down somewhere. And that's really important to me to be with the guys. And then I like it when a men's group and a women's group gets together.
Mm-hmm.
And just for a casual meeting or whatever.
I did that once a long time ago. We had a meeting, my women's group and a men's group, and there was a little bit of tension or friction. I don't remember why, but it was a little tense. Have you experienced that? Any ideas why?
No, just that, how long ago was it?
No, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I think things have improved. I mean, we have more women getting elected to high offices, and that's going to make a big difference, I think.
Yeah. What do you think is the legacy of Trump's version of masculinity? Because there's like 70 million Americans who voted for him, and many of them love him.
Yes. He might be the worst president we've ever had.
Yep.
Because he picks on vulnerable people.
Yep.
And I'm so glad we got rid of him.
Oh,
I'm
boy.
sorry we didn't do it earlier. But people in charge now are much better, much better.
I read an article that Biden is kind of like the good dad, like actors like Liam Neeson, however you say his name, plays, the protective good dad who protects their kids. Do you see Biden as a good male role model?
Well, I do basically. I mean, I certainly voted for him, and I think he's doing the best he can under the circumstances. But he has to be accountable to everybody, basically,
Yeah.
and that's hard. And the majority of Americans are not yet pro-feminist,
Right.
not yet supporting the strong women
Right.
much as they should, nor the people of color.
Yeah.
Though it's better in some areas than others on both of those counts. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the Bay Area, I think I'm a product of the Bay Area in part.
Mm.
And my former wife, whom I'd like to make my wife again,
Oh.
but I'm not going to come on too strong because we've only had one gathering so far, she and I. She came over. And it's interesting, she lost one of her legs. But I didn't even know that. We walked out on my property. And I just didn't notice it, and came another time that we spoke, and she said it. For some people that might be a negative. For me, it's a positive that she suffered through that,
Mm.
and walks proudly.
Mm.
I'm going to see her in a couple of, either tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
When you two were living together, how did you organize the roommate issues like cooking and cleaning and bill paying and those kinds of daily tasks?
Well, I've never been known as a very good cook. So I do most of my own cooking now, obviously. So let's see. Well, the cooking was one thing. What was one of the other things you mentioned?
Cleaning, bill paying, money.
I'm not a very good cleaner, and I don't mind. I think I'm just looking around at my place. I do clean it up every once. It's not like it's dirty, but it's just like, it's a pretty small house, and I've thrown away a lot of stuff. I threw away a lot of stuff I shouldn't have about men's issues. I should have kept those.
Mm.
But there were so many things, so many. But the books where I mentioned gender, I kept those books.
Good. What do you see in terms of men's studies courses and men's studies journals? What's the current status?
Well, I think it depends on whether they're pro feminine or anti-feminine.
Mm.
And by feminine, I mean to include men and women. Some men are more feminine,
Mm-hmm.
and some men can't stand that.
Mm.
Kind of want to slap it out of him.
Mm.
So I think it depends on, and let's face it, some feminist groups, the women have been hurt so bad that they're so mad.
Mm.
And so there are many variables here. We still have a long ways to go. As you said, the Scandinavians
Mm-hmm.
have made a lot. And I also went to Findhorn. Do you know about Findhorn?
I do. In Scotland.
Yeah. So I spent a while there, and I picked up some of the good vibes from the men and the women. So I think that I did that early in.
When you were there, were they still working with the nature spirits, the devas of the cabbage or the devas of the sweet peas or whatever?
Yes, that's what I remember. Exactly.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
And it was also, obviously, it's located in an area that's surrounded by water.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about that, too, the water.
Yeah. Do you apply any of those principles to your garden? Do you talk to your boysenberry Davis and thank them?
Yes.
That's great.
Because the best pickers are women.
Mm.
And I definitely look for female pickers.
Mm-hmm.
And my second in charge now is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So though she's getting busy with a whole lot of other stuff, so I'm sort of losing her.
Mm. So to finish with Trump, do you think that the legacy will be revulsion against his kind of masculinity, or is he fanning the fuels of people like the Oath Keepers and those right-wing militias, or what do you think is going to be the outcome?
Is that a cat in
That
the
is
background?
my cat.
That's
Yes.
good.
Yes.
I think that Trump is so bad, it's so visible.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, there are people who need that. But my opinion is in part it's fear of feminine strength.
Mm.
It's fear of women's natural love of their children.
Mm.
It's not that men don't have that, but so often, and it varies from country to country.
Right.
Some places it's much worse to be a woman than in this country.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and my dad was assigned there,
Mm.
in Saudi Arabia.
Did you live there with him? I mean, were you? Yeah.
No,
Oh.
it was one place we couldn't go to.
Oh, right.
But what I remember of my Uncle Dale and Aunt Elva in Iowa farming was that they were both strong, but she was so strong. She's my ideal
Mm.
woman. I
Mm.
mean, I love my mother very deeply,
Yeah.
and she suffered a lot. And none of us 5 kids know why she put up so much with our father. I mean, he got better, but she was caring for him.
Mm.
All the way to his death. I don't think he would have done that. I don't think he would have been brave enough.
Mm. His male sense of duty might have kicked in.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Mm. So overall, do you think the Trump legacy is going to be positive or negative?
Negative.
Mm.
I mean, they got the guns for one thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He initiated the end of America. I mean, I think America's lost.
Mm.
And I think a lot of it is because of what he did.
Mm.
All the people he killed and was responsible for killing indirectly,
Mm-hmm.
and excluding women.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it was a turning point.
Mm.
Sometimes things have to get worse before they can get better. And Biden is so much better, in my opinion. I voted for him. I'm not particularly enamored by him, but, I don't have to make the decisions he has to make.
And certainly he's taken on more policy strong decisions than Obama. So he kind of learned from Obama trying to be fair, nice guy, I think, and he's just going to go for it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And having a vice president like he has.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, maybe she'll be the next president.
Yeah, and these kind of things connect to each other. Discrimination on the basis of race, sex, age,
Mm-hmm.
number of things that America is, it's one of the better countries to live in.
Yeah.
Though some of the Central American countries that I've lived in have been wonderful.
Like Costa Rica?
Yeah, Costa Rica.
Pura Vida, that's a pretty good motto for a country.
Yeah.
And what did you see in terms of gender roles in places like Costa Rica and Chile?
Well, yeah, you just have strong women who aren't as timid.
Ah.
I mean, we have those kind of women here. We have a lot of them, but I think, the people that they hire, the people that they elect, it's just a better. I thought about if I wasn't so compromised in some ways, I would move to one of those countries. But at my age, I wouldn't want to be a burden on them, because I think a lot of stuff's going to come down in this country, unfortunately.
What kind of stuff?
Well, who knows? It's just like there's so many Trumpsters that are still here.
Yeah.
And they have the weapons.
Right. Right. I was going to say about Harris, what I think is interesting is her husband is so happy to be the second gentleman. He's not resentful. He's proud of her. He's supportive. He seems to be a good male role model.
Yeah, I think you're right.
He's delighted. You can tell. Anything that we've left out that you would like people to think about gender reconciliation and that kind of thing?
Well, I think a lot of it is up to men taking more initiative and being willing to listen. And I think men's and women's groups together. I've been in a couple of those. I tried to get some together here, but there wasn't enough interest. But there's a new men's group that I'm going to. We had to take a break because of the weather and all, but and Trump. But we're getting back together in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to suggest that we. I've been in men's groups where we invite women to come to some of our meetings.
Yeah, every once in a while.
Yeah, every once in a while. And if they would invite us to come to some of their meetings, that would be good too, because I've had some very good experiences.
Randy Crutcher and I used to do these women's workshops, and we'd have the men sit in a circle with the women outside listening to them, and then the women in the circle with the men outside listening to them. And that was really interesting. I think that what we asked them to talk about is, what would you like men or women to understand about you?
I think that's a very good format.
Yeah.
I hope I can borrow it.
Sure. One thing that came up is that the men said nice guys are friends with women, and then the women have like romantic relationships with the jerks, and they didn't like that.
I'm not sure that statistically that could be proven. I don't think so.
Well, maybe it's true for like young men.
Yeah.
Like the high school football versus the nerd in high school.
Right. And also, I wonder about, people from other cultures. I mean, when it's better or worse, or what the variables are.
What I think is interesting about the Nordic countries that I've read is they're happier. And they don't have the kind of worries that we do, because they have a good social support network, childcare, elder care, free college. No one's worried all the time about, are they going to get sick and go bankrupt? So they just seem happier. They're more relaxed. And that probably helps people to have better relationships if you're not worried and anxious.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. So I'm going to get this transcribed, and I would want to send it to you to go over it. So you wouldn't read it on email, right?
Yeah, it'd be easier unless you're on a deadline if you could just put it in an envelope and mail it to me.
Okay, sure. What's your address?
It's 1543
Mm-hmm.
Cunningham Road.
Cunningham?
Yeah,
Okay, road.
Sebastopol,
Mm-hmm.